As the founder of the modern theory of evolution, Charles Darwin published some of the most important works in scientific history. His works offered a scientific explanation for the evolution of human beings, and to this day have led to some of the most heated debates around the world.
The idea is evolution by natural selection, and the genius who thought of it was Charles Darwin.
Darwin himself initially planned to follow a medical career and studied at Edinburgh University, but later switched to a divinity at Cambridge. In 1831, he joined a 5-year scientific expedition on the survey ship HMS Beagle. On the voyage, Darwin read Lyell's Principles of Geology, which suggested that the fossils found in rocks were actually evidence of animals that had lived many thousands or millions of years ago. Lyell's argument was reinforced in Darwin's own mind by the rich variety of animal life and the geological features he saw during his voyage. The breakthrough in his ideas came in the Galapagos Islands, 500 miles west of South America. Darwin noticed that each island supported its own form of finch, which were closely related but different in important ways. Perhaps the best known of Darwin's species he collected while on the Galapagos Islands were what are now called Darwin's finches. However, Darwin was not very familiar with birds, so he killed and preserved the specimens to take back to England with him, where he could collaborate with an ornithologist. The HMS Beagle continued to sail on to as faraway lands as New Zealand before returning to England in 1836. It was back in Europe when he enlisted the help of John Gould, a celebrated ornithologist in England. Gould was surprised to see the differences in beaks of the birds and identified the 14 different specimens as actual different species, 12 of which were brand new species. He had not seen these species anywhere before and concluded that they were unique to the Galapagos Islands. The other, similar birds Darwin had brought back from the South American mainland were much more common, but different than the new Galapagos species. On his return to England in 1836, Darwin tried to solve the riddles of these observations and the puzzle of how species evolved. Influenced by the ideas of Malthus, he proposed a theory of evolution occurring by the process of natural selection. The animals, or plants, best suited for their environment are more likely to survive and reproduce, passing on the characteristics which help them survive to their offspring. Gradually, the species changes over time. Darwin worked on his theory for 20 years. After learning that another naturalist, Alfred Russel Wallace, had developed similar ideas, the two made a joint announcement of their discovery in 1858. In 1859, Darwin published On the Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection. The book was extremely controversial because a logical extension of Darwin's theory was that Homo sapiens was simply another form of animal. It made it seem possible that even people might have just evolved, quite possibly from apes, and destroyed the prevailing orthodoxy on how the world was created. Darwin's theory was attacked, particularly by the church. However, his ideas soon gained currency and have become the new orthodoxy. Over 150 years later, his theory, although accepted by the scientific community, still causes one of the most heated debates in history: evolution versus creationism. His theory also developed into political and economic justifications for nuances, as well as building empires advocated by people such as social Darwinists. Darwin's fame and popularity led to his name being associated with ideas and movements which at times only had an indirect relation to his writings, and sometimes went directly against his expressed comments. Soon after Darwin's book was published in 1859, critics described his description of a struggle for existence as justification for the English industrial capitalism of this time. The term Darwinism was used for the evolutionary ideas of others, including Spencer's survival of the fittest as free market progress and Ernst Haeckel's racist ideas of human development. Writers used natural selection for various, often contradictory, ideologies such as capitalism, racism, welfare, and imperialism. However, Darwin's holistic view of nature included dependency of one being on another. Thus pacifists, socialists, liberal social reformers, and anarchists, such as Peter Kupton, stressed the value of cooperation over struggle within a species. Darwin himself insisted that social policy should not simply be guided by the concepts of struggle and selection in nature. After the 1880s, a eugenics movement developed on the ideas of biological inheritance, and for scientific justification of their ideas appealed to some concepts of Darwinism. In Britain, most shared Darwin's cautious views on voluntary improvement and sought to encourage those with good traits in positive eugenes. Negative eugenics to remove the feeble-minded were popular in America, Canada, and Australia. The UNCs in the United States introduced compulsory sterilization laws, followed by several other countries. Subsequently, Nazi eugenics brought Field into disrepute. The term social Darwinism was used infrequently from around the 1890s, but became more popular as a derogatory term in the 1940s when used by Richard Hofstadter to attack the laissez-faire conservationism of those like William Graham Sumner, who opposed reform and socialism. Since then, it has been used as a term of abuse by those opposed to what they think are the moral consequences of evolution. The theory of evolution by natural selection, and with it the concept of the evolutionary tree of life, have since been thoroughly tested and verified by a wide range of evidence, and especially by the discovery of genetics. The shared genetic code, the DNA instructions that specify the makeup proteins from which organisms' bodies are built, confirms a common ancestry for all life on Earth today. Darwin had convinced most scientists that evolution as descent with modification was correct, and he was regarded as a great scientist who had revolutionized ideas. Though few agreed with his view that natural selection had been the main, but not the exclusive, means of modification, he was honored in June 1909 by more than 400 officials and scientists from across the world. They met in Cambridge to commemorate the 15th anniversary of On the Origin of Species. During this period, which has been called the eclipse of Darwinism, scientists proposed various alternative evolutionary mechanisms which proved to be untenable. The development of modern evolutionary synthesis from the 1930s to the 1950s, incorporating natural selection with population genetics, brought broad scientific consensus that natural selection was a basic mechanism of evolution. This synthesis set the frame of reference for modern debates and refinements of the theory.